Daley Blind sends it in. Maro-Lady wins the header and it's set. And into his own goal. Manchester United have got the goal. What a huge moment for Manchester United. A goal that's worth its weight in Champions League goal. In he goes towards Naldo, who gets his head to it on a score. Naldo, heartbreak for Manchester United, almost straight away.
You can't believe it. I can't believe what I'm seeing. Naldo's so dangerous on set pieces. Louis van Gaal can't believe it.
Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Chronicles Express with me, Andy, from the Red Devil Chronicle. This week, confidence hammered out of United and their omission scandal at the Volkswagen Arena. United chat coming up next. Well, it's been a painful week to be a Manchester United fan, hasn't it? Dumped out of Europe, and of course we drew 0-0 last weekend against West Ham at home. And that's where I'm going to start this week's show. With the game last weekend, Manchester United 0, West Ham 0. Now, although there's no Nick and no Joe with me this week, due to no studio being available, I'm going to start with a prediction that Nick made on last week's show before the game. Now, Nick said that he predicted the game to be boring, and said there'd be probably no goals. Now, fortunately, in terms of our sort of Premier League predictor league that we have going on, he then did predict that we'd win 1-0, which was good news for us. But bad news, of course, for United. Now, he was half right in what he said. I don't think the game was boring to watch. Certainly, in terms of when you relate it against previous games that we've seen this season. But worryingly, it was open and end-to-end, and that's what led to the game being more interesting to watch, but also led to our defence looking rather shaky again. Now, the downside for me, looking back at the game, was that West Ham probably walked away from it feeling unlucky not to take all 3 points, really. They created the better of the chances, certainly. That one early doors, especially from Victor Moses, stands out for me. One-on-one against De Gea. How was that allowed to happen so early on in the game? Great save by De Gea, who was absolutely immense again on the day. But that should not be allowed to happen. And it was really poor. I think it was Daley Blind gave the ball away with a nothing pass. And then just let Moses run beyond him. It was awful. There was also an uncharacteristic error from David De Gea. He got into a bit of a mix-up with Smalling with the ball that came in at the near post from Cresswell. And Smalling eventually got the ball clear via Zarate, I believe, and the post. Reed hit the same post a couple of minutes later as well from the corner. They definitely had the better of the chances. Now, that being said, we created plenty of opportunities ourselves. 21 attempts, I believe we had, during the game against West Ham. Now, only one of those was on target. Now, that means altogether in the last 2 Premier League games, there's only been 3 efforts from United that have gone on target. If we carry on like that, we will absolutely end up struggling to make top 4. We are not testing the opposition goalkeeper enough, and I made this point on last week's show that we need to be more clinical. We're not often enough putting this test in against keeper, as I say. You know, we keep failing to do that, and other teams are punishing us because they are getting 1 or 2 opportunities and they're putting it away. Now, is this simply a confidence issue or part of a bigger problem that we don't have enough natural finishers in the squad? Let me know, please. Comment below on the video, also at WeFollowUnited on Twitter with your thoughts on that. Now, I'm not going to linger on this game too much because, of course, there's a bigger issue that we all know, the elephant in the room, of course, at Wolfsburg. Before I do move on to that game, though, just get some fans' thoughts from the fan takeover on Monday to that game. We always ask you for your one-line review of the game and your score out of 10. And interesting to see some of these coming in again. At Cogsy666, poor for 80 minutes and not clinical enough. Created chances but only at the target once. Pointed out exactly as I'm saying there. 2 out of 10 he gives it. Now, producer Joe, despite not being here, got his thoughts in as well. 1 out of 10 he gave the game. Predictable, boring and frustrating. I personally didn't find it boring, but I know, I mean, when you're reading through the comments again, it looks as though a lot of people did find it a difficult watch. At Clay, 1978 United, again, boring, lifeless, lacking killer instinct, which is where my problem lies from that game. 3 out of 10 he gives it. He's also added there, was so happy after City result 2, you're killing us, LVG. Yep, it was a weekend where we could have made ground on the title charge leaders, and we didn't. We failed. At Buy Something MU, pathetic, 2 out of 10 from him. At Copious Opium, better fluidity, absence of Rooney obvious, though Fellaini still only plan B or C. Play Pereira, no fear, 7 out of 10 from him. That was a very high score for the game compared to the rest of them. Now then, let's move on and let's tackle the big issue of this week. It was, of course, the midweek game on Tuesday. Wolfsburg 3, Manchester United 2. And in Van Gaal's biggest game to date at the club came his biggest failing, in my opinion. The reason I say that is, if this was David Moyes on the back of this result, he would have been absolutely crucified for this. Now, Louis van Gaal was trusted with 230 million to spend on new players. Forget the net spend, that's what he had to lay out on improving this squad. Now, that amount that he had has not been spent well, and for me, hasn't built any sort of squad depth at all. Getting rid of the deadwood, absolutely fine, but absolutely no plan in terms of replacements that have left us drastically short. And I think also with the same sort of problems that we were moaning about in the summer, we still lack a natural goal scorer. Anthony Martial has taken off really well, but I'm not totally convinced yet that he's a finished product in terms of being a finisher, and he shouldn't be. He's 20 years old, but we don't have any other plan. Well, the other plan we do have, of course, is to play Fellaini, which became Plan A on the evening. Now, my worry is, how do you let the players like Van Persie go, Hernandez, Falcao, Di Maria, even players like Januzaj, Welbeck, even Wilfried Zaha you could mention when they're there, without any real replacements? Now, you imagine David Moyes puts Nick Powell on in a Champions League crunch match with United needing the win to go through. Our squad depth is pathetic, and that is down to Louis van Gaal. End of. He should have gone out and bought more players. He should have covered more positions. Nick Powell has played something in the region of about 90 minutes of football since the new year. It might even be less than that. I know he played in a youth game against Norwich. I don't know if he played the full game. But he was out for something in the region of 9 months with an injury. And so how is he then expected to come on and turn the game against Wolfsburg in the Champions League? I don't understand the logic. But we were left there because he's been backed into a corner by not planning. And this is why I'm saying, if you compare this against David Moyes, I think he would have been lynched. The outrage would have been bigger than it is over Van Gaal, and trust me, that's been big enough. But isn't it unfair to give Louis van Gaal more respect than someone like David Moyes, following the spend that he's had, to end up with the squad that he's got, to end up making decisions like that in such a big game? Let me know. That's what I think anyway. Now, what did we learn from Tuesday night? Well, we learned that if you ever wondered why Louis van Gaal struggles to take the handbrake off, that is the reason why. Since the Arsenal game, Van Gaal has withdrawn within himself, and as a result has withdrawn the United squad. And I think you see from the game against Wolfsburg that our defence is far from sorted, with Fellaini giving terrible support to Schweinsteiger in a midfield performance. It wasn't great from either of the two of them, I must add. They left the defence completely open and looking vulnerable the whole game. Fellaini is not a defensive midfielder. For the Wolfsburg second goal, he left Schweinsteiger 2-on-1 at the edge of our own area. That's just not on. You can't give that sort of support to your fellow defensive midfielder. And as a result, Wolfsburg scored an absolutely superb goal. Don't take it away from them. But that is why they scored it. Now, it also seems to me that if Smalling and De Gea don't have phenomenal games, we look like we're going to ship goals. And Smalling on the night did have one of his poorer games for as long as I can remember. He's been absolutely class, and I'm not going to take anything away from him for that. But such a large amount of pressure to be put on one defender, as well as our goalkeeper, it just seems excessive to me. Now, not only are Jones and McNair seemingly constantly injured, Rojo struggling for fitness and form as well, but are any of them actually good enough? Are they the sort of players that you would expect to see in a championship winning team? Are they the sort of combination of defenders that you would say, yeah, I could see them in a World 11. Yes, I could see them playing and winning in a Champions League final. I could see them stopping the likes of Messi and Ronaldo. Now, that's going to be a struggle for the best in the world to do, I admit. But we are far, far away from having that standard of player even. And that really worries me. Now, as I mentioned, it was the first time that he's let United have licence to push forward since the Arsenal defeat. And we were taking risks at the expense of conceding possession. We did do that on the night. It didn't work in either game, and perhaps I think Louis van Gaal just needs to work on a balance between the two. Rather than having to withdraw and park the bus or go gung-ho all-out attack, why not just go somewhere in the middle and just play the game as it plays out? There's no need for us to be taking unnecessary risks, and I think we took too many risks too early on in the game, in my opinion, that left us in a bad position. But I just think, why not have some sort of balance? It must be possible to achieve. Work on it during the week, execute it at the weekend. Now, other things we learned from the game Tuesday night is that Dante and Schürrle have a better future in officiating than the linesman. The correct decision was made by the definition of offside, so I'm not going to argue with him on that. Mata clearly did interfere in play, regardless of whether he touched it or not. But why there is an argument over the use of sort of video technology for offside goals, I'm not sure of, because the amount of time it took the official to make that decision. I mean, as I said on Twitter, I was ready putting my my tickets in for the last 16 round. You know, I'd bought them practically by the time we decided to rule the goal out. So why not give the officials a better opportunity to make the right decision and give them that technology that is available to them to help them make the right call? That confuses me. We brought it in with goal line technology. That's not slowing the game down. And with the amount of time it took over a decision like that, I don't see video replay slowing the game down either. So, that would be an issue for me going forward. I would have been upset if the goal was scored against us. I know some fans were saying it should have been given by the ruling of the Champions League, but this only serves another problem for me with UEFA and only highlights that they are continuing to move behind the times. If that rule isn't currently within its UEFA Champions League regulations, that if a player is interfering in play, then it's offside. If that isn't currently in there, it certainly should be, because by definition, or my definition of offside, whether he touched it or not, he was interfering with the goalkeeper, and with the play at the time, and so it should have been given. So UEFA need to take a look at that as well, certainly. Now, why were we unable to shore up the game after scoring? This was a big problem for me. On both occasions we conceded on the night, within a couple of minutes, they'd scored again, and it left us back in the same situation. You'd have at least thought by now that Man United were capable of tightening up a game, just keeping hold of the ball, playing boring, dull football to take the edge off the game, to silence the crowd for 5-10 minutes afterwards, but they didn't. And I think the problem with this falls down to not having Schneiderlin available to start. He is a big part of the defensive aspect of our game, in my opinion. And I think if you'd have seen him out there instead of Fellaini, you'd have seen a completely different game, a lot more support defensively. And I think he does a job that's completely unsung, often unseen. A lot of players see him, a lot of fans rather, see him as an average player. He's far from that. The job that he does in that team is absolutely key. Now, I hate to bring up old times when looking back at the Wolfsburg game, and compare it to the way Ferguson was and all the rest of it. But where is Louis van Gaal during these games? Now, I know everyone has a different style when it comes to management, but how is he planning on getting instructions onto the pitch? You can't expect to sort of sit there for 45 minutes and set up a team the same way and not expect anything to change. It's naive. What is he doing? Where is he? He should be up there. He should be giving confidence. He should be barking orders. He should be making sure that his team is set up exactly the way he wants it. And if that is exactly the way he wants his team to be set up, then he is not doing a good enough job, clearly. Now, I don't know if he's sponsored by Pritt Stick, and yes, I said Pritt, not Prick, but what is keeping him sat down constantly on the sidelines? We've got our thoughts on it, that he's writing diaries to sell in his retirement to keep him going. My theory in particular, he's got a diary on the go to the reason he dislikes Spanish players. Let us know what you think he's doing, because it's causing me a great deal of confusion. Louis van Gaal, get off your seat, get the players going, get them set up in the way that you want them. And then, it's down to the players then to execute that. But if you're not making the changes, How are they supposed to know what shape to take, how to play the game at that time without you telling them what to do? You are the manager. You are supposed to make those decisions. Now, something else we also discovered from Tuesday's game is that all the good work we did from last year, unfortunately, to get us into Europe was completely pointless and is now ruined. Without Champions League football, how are we going to attract key targets in January to keep our season afloat? We've talked about this January being absolutely massive for Manchester United, and now that we've got no Champions League football to offer, prices are going to go up for a start, but how are we going to attract the top level of player that we need, the ones that we're rumoured to be after? We're not going to get them without European competition for them to come to, and without any guarantee, really, that we're going to finish in the top four, even if we sign them to get into it for next season. So that's going to be a struggle for me as well as a result of what's happened. For all the negatives, though, Varela and Borthwick Jackson on the night played very well. Huge nights for them. And despite the odd error, I've got no criticism for them at all. They were great, and fair play to them. After little to no time with the first team squad playing, they did exceptionally well. Van Gaal was backed into a corner through injuries and a lack of options in playing, as I mentioned earlier. So he had to play them, and they gave a good account of themselves. Brilliant stuff for them. They could cement places in the team going forward. I hope they do. But that wasn't down to LVG giving youth a chance. That was down to LVG not planning the squad properly in the first place, in my opinion. Again, let me know if you feel otherwise. But it didn't feel that way. It felt like those decisions were forced upon him because there was literally no other way to go. Now, 81% of the fans who voted on our poll prior to the game, or after the game rather, following that Champions League exit, said that they were Louis van Gaal out. Now, whether the majority of fans are willing to give Van Gaal until the summer, I don't know. I certainly have accepted he probably will see out the season, but we must start looking to pursue options further in terms of our long-term goal if they become available in the summer. And if they are available before that as well, you have to consider them. Louis van Gaal is only in it for himself, and so why shouldn't the club and the fans be in it for ourselves longer term as well? So there you go, 81% of the fans, a huge amount following that game saying Louis van Gaal out. Incredible. Now, imagine a final season though under Van Gaal, and this is why I'm saying we have to look at it in terms of summer options, to make this change. Players are struggling already to buy into the philosophy that he has going. So how motivated will he be knowing that he's going at the end of the season? That is going to be a big problem for us. We did run another poll during the week as well. This was before the Champions League game. 56% of fans voted to United going through in the Champions League when we asked, are we going to make it through to the knockout stages? So 44% of the fans said that they didn't think we'd make it through. Unfortunately, the majority were wrong on this occasion, and we did fall down. And it comes down to the PSV game as well. I know plenty of people are already aware, and we've had plenty of conversation about it. But that PSV game at home, certainly, to be as blamed as the Wolfsburg game, if not more. We were guaranteed to go through had we won that game at Old Trafford. Same against Wolfsburg as well. If we'd have won, we were guaranteed to go through, obviously in a more difficult circumstances. But United failed on both occasions. Real letdown for me, the rest of the fans, and United as a whole. Really poor to see us crash out at the group stages. So there you go. An interesting, frustrating, upsetting week to be a Manchester United fan, as we said at the top of the show. But more fan opinion to come from yourselves next in the Fan Takeover. Yes, so every Monday we ask for your views on a number of big debates and polls surrounding Manchester United. And I'm glad to say, despite the week we've had, the response was brilliant as ever from you on the Twitter world at WeFollowUnited. So thanks as always for getting involved. I'm just going to fire straight in and dive straight into the comments and results from this week's Fan Takeover. We started with this question. Louis van Gaal says he can't understand the frustration from the fans following the booing, etc. during the West Ham game. Does Louis van Gaal understand the United fans' expectations? Now, 70% of the fans said no, he doesn't understand them, and that he doesn't understand the sort of expectations surrounding the club in general. Now, there was a great point made, or a great couple of points made on the comment section underneath this. Dipak Siani says, what he fails to grasp is United's identity in terms of playing style. Fergie saw it as his duty to entertain fans. Louis van Gaal doesn't see it that way. Also, what he considers attacking football is confused. Spending time in the opposition half doesn't make it attacking, especially when there is no penetration or threat from United with through balls. Great points made, and this is exactly where I was going with regards to that question. United fans have a certain expectation of the way that United play. It isn't just about win percentages and possession stats, it's much more than that, and it's something that stats can't measure. It's passion, drive, dedication, and never say die attitude, leaving it all out on the pitch. Now, if stats were available on these sort of things, United would certainly be below average on all of them compared to the way that they were under Sir Alex Ferguson and in previous years. And you can't help but feel it's because of how Louis van Gaal sets the team up that we end up playing that way. At C. Clay 1978 United added to the points that had been made on this question. He's a stubborn old fool, stuck in his ancient ways, retire now and let United free. I think perhaps some frustrations creeping in from longer line of issues than just, in particular, the West Ham game there from Chris. Now, second question fired out on this week's Fan Takeover was going back to a point I made earlier on in the show. Only 3 shots on target in the last 2 Premier League games. Should the players take more responsibility for winning the games? Huge response on this, and 96% of those involved in the vote on this said yes, they should. So only 4% are saying that the players shouldn't be taking more responsibility. That says to me a lot, to be honest with you. Looking at the comments put on there, at Big C75 says, absolutely, once the players cross the white line, it's down to them. And I agree with that point made entirely. I just don't know if Louis van Gaal's signings that he's made so far are good enough for the level of expectation that the club has. What I mean by that is, with regards to this clinical side of things, I mentioned Anthony Martial at 20 is not going to be the finished article. Jesse Lingard is being given a big chance, not one of United's signings, but certainly brought through this season into the squad. Memphis, again, young, just brought into the squad during the summer. None of these are the finished products, and yet these are 3 prominent figures in terms of our attacking lineup. And I think, as well as needing to give them more time and a bit more patience, we also need to give them some support and backup from ready-made, proven talent. Wayne Rooney should be one of those. Of course, we all know about his failings so far this season. But again, to put the pressure on just Wayne Rooney as the more experienced player up front is a big ask. Juan Mata, he's experienced as well. Not a proven goal scorer. Yes, he chips in with them, but we need more in terms of proven attacking players, proven goal scorers. That's what we're missing at the moment, in my opinion. And now, due to the way things have played out during the week, we might miss out on those targets, not only during January, but potentially over summer, depending on how our season peters out with the Europa League as a distraction. Now, the next question that we put out there on this week's Fan Takeover was that United were still unbeaten in 90 minutes since the Arsenal game. That, of course, before the Wolfsburg game. We asked, is Louis van Gaal setting up United too safely? 84% of fans said yes, he is. And at Copious Opium says that it's still worrying at the back. He said there were some worrying moments versus West Ham at the back still. And I think that was, it's a very good point. During the West Ham game, there were certainly signs still of problems defensively that only went further above and beyond that during the Wolfsburg game as well. So I think we did see the evidence of this. Although we are setting up too safely, I think we can perhaps understand a little bit more now why Van Gaal has been doing that. But like I said earlier, this over-defensive strategy or all-out attacking strategy needs to be balanced better. That's that would be my thoughts, and that's where we're going wrong at the moment. We're seeing it either one way or the other. It needs to have a better balance to it. Moving quickly on, because I think that point has been covered earlier in the show. We also asked, are United only near the top of the league because of the poor standard of other teams? 85% of fans that voted on this said, yes, we are. And at C-Clay 1978, United said, think the lesser teams are closing the gap due to money in the Premier League. 100 million being given to the bottom club. They are all spending and recruiting better for it. And this is a great point, and this is exactly why I asked the question. When you look at teams now in the Premier League, this summer just gone was probably one of the most iconic summers in terms of transfers that you've seen in a long time. And the reason I say that is you look at Tottenham chasing Saido Berahino all summer. You look at Chelsea chasing John Stones from Everton all summer. These players would have gone every other season of the Premier League for the sort of money that was being thrown in by both clubs towards the end of it. But due to the TV rights money coming in, and due to a lot more Premier League clubs being or becoming cash rich, they don't have to say yes. They're not in a position where they're forced to sell their star players to keep them going anymore. Now that's refreshing and absolutely brilliant for the Premier League in terms of a competition, but that also represents a significant problem for the so-called bigger teams of the league that have been there throughout the years, that have been cash rich throughout the whole time, because it is now going to be difficult to get hold of the targets you want. And so as a result of that, we have seen more competition in terms of the league. When you look at Stoke, prime example against Manchester City last weekend, the attacking lineup that they put out there, Shaqiri was in there, Bojan, Afellay, Arnautovic. These players have played for huge clubs. I know obviously with Bojan it didn't work out at Barcelona at the time, but Shaqiri obviously Bayern Munich and Inter Milan, Arnautovic, Inter Milan as well. These are big clubs that players are coming from to the Premier League, to teams that weren't seen even perhaps as Premier League regulars only a couple of seasons ago. So that just goes to highlight that there has been a shift in balance. And as a result of that, I think you will find that over time, over the next couple of seasons, it will only get tighter at the top, and the competition will only get more fierce in terms of the teams that are going for the title. Absolutely brilliant to watch, don't get me wrong, but for United, a real concern. How are we going to convince the top players to come to us when everyone else has the money and they're currently outperforming us? Big worries there. Now, as I say, the fan takeover this week, absolutely brilliant. I know I fired through there, but thanks ever so much to everyone that got involved with your opinions this week on the big questions surrounding Manchester United. And we're going to end this week's show, as we always do, ahead of a big weekend of football with the weekend preview, and that's coming up next. Saturday 5:30 kickoff. It's Bournemouth against Manchester United. What should be a great game, and that's unusual for us to say with the way recent results have gone. But this should be an entertainer, hopefully. I'm going to have a quick look at how the team's currently breaking down in terms of their form, what we've got to look out for at the weekend. And we're going to start by focusing on Bournemouth, the team that we go to face. Bournemouth sit 17th in the league at the moment, just one place above relegation. Their season has been savaged by injury. Of course, missing Callum Wilson, Tyrone Mings, their big signing, most expensive in club history, and also Max Gradle as well. So a couple of key components missing from Bournemouth, and that has led to a slide down the table from them, unfortunately, despite a good start. One win in their last 6 in the league, and that came in their relegation scrap against Chelsea. Not even sorry for saying that, Chelsea fans. But at home in their last 6, nearly identical to their current form in terms of their last 6 games. One win against Sunderland, 3 draws, 2 defeats, scoring in all but one of them. So they're still grabbing goals. They always look a threat going forward, and they always set up to attack teams as well. In terms of their last 6 overall, home and away, they've got that 1 win, as I mentioned, against Chelsea, 3 defeats and 2 draws in the other 5 of those games. They currently sit 16th in the form guide based on how they're going at the moment. Now, United, by contrast, in terms of the form guide, have only lost 1 in their last 6 away from home in the league. That was, of course, the Arsenal game. 3 wins and 2 draws in the other 5. And overall in the last 6, we've had 2 draws, 2 wins, and 2 more draws. So consistent in terms of the draw and win column. We haven't lost in our last 6, which is always a good thing to see, but 4 draws in the last 6 says a lot for me about the way we're going. How do we set up then against Bournemouth? How do we stop their attacking threat that we know, despite the fact that they're missing players, they will still come at us with, and they still have a lot of talent in that squad as well. Now, the way I'd personally set up in terms of my squad for the game would be De Gea, of course, in goal as ever. Varela's going to come in and keep his place at right back after impressing against Wolfsburg. And because really there are no other options, of course, Darmian went off injured. And I probably wouldn't play Young there either. McNair is probably going to have to start at centre-back, depending on what happens over the coming days with Chris Smalling. We know he's certainly a doubt. I hope he's there, otherwise we will struggle. Blynn's going to stick in behind next to McNair or hopefully Smalling on the day. And Borthwick Jackson's going to retain his place for me at left-back. Now, that's not the greatest looking defence by any means, but Varela and Borthwick Jackson, as I mentioned earlier in the show, were very impressive. Daley Blind has surprised a lot of fans, including myself, this season with how he's performed at the back. So, he deserves his place completely. And hopefully, as I say, it's just Chris Smalling, I think, that's going to be the big one on the day. If we miss him, then we are going to face a lot more chances against us, I feel. Moving on to the midfield, I'm going to set it up with a 3, and I really want Louis van Gaal to go back to a 4-3-3. I know I was the one pioneering the 4-2-3-1 shout back only 6 months ago, but you have to change with the times, and 4-2-3-1 has not been best suited to our style of play or to the players available, and so I revert back to the 3 that brought us relative success last season, and certainly the best formation that we've had under Louis van Gaal since he arrived. Now, Schweinsteiger, I know obviously there's this whole thing about whether the suspension is going to be overturned, because at the moment he is suspended for the game. I would say with the amount he's been playing, whether or not that ban was overturned, which it probably won't be, I would go with Carrick in midfield, and I'd also go with Schneiderlin. You have to bring him back in for this game. He's completely about the defensive shape of the game and about protecting our backline from threats. So he has to come in. And I'm also going to stick Juan Mata in midfield as well, in the 3 to the left. And I'm going to give him the licence to sort of go forward and almost pivot into a 4-2-3-1, if you like. But just to give an extra body in midfield, because otherwise we might get overrun in the centre of the park. The 3 I'm going to go with as the 3 going forward are going to be Jesse Lingard to the right of the 3, Memphis to the left, and Martial up front. I think it pretty much has to set up that way. Argument for Ashley Young to come into the squad somewhere, perhaps ahead of Memphis. I'd certainly keep Lingard in there because he has been an exciting prospect for us going forward. And despite not being the complete finished product, certainly is unpolished, he has been exciting to watch, so I keep him in there. It's just whether or not you put Young perhaps over Memphis. But Memphis has improved his game over the last couple of weeks. When he came back in against Watford, he scored the opener on the day and was okay on the day. So I think perhaps keep him in there for confidence purposes. And I think there will be chances of plenty for United again against perhaps a defence that aren't of the best standard in the league, I think it'd be fair to say. So a chance perhaps for some goals. Moving on then to finish the weekend preview with the score predictions then. We've got a couple in so far. At C. Clay 1978 United with a bizarre shout here, goes for 5-0 Man United. I think he's just given up. And at Coxie 666 says 2-0 to United. I think again you'd struggle not to concede with the way Bournemouth are going forward and with our potential backline. But I certainly think there are goals in it, and I'm going to go with 2 to United as Cogsy666 has on Twitter. But I'm also going to go for 2 to Bournemouth. I'm sorry about doing this, but it's just the way I feel it's going to go. I think there will be plenty of opportunities going both ways, and with the way Bournemouth set out to attack, as I say, I think there will be opportunities and chances, and with us grabbing a couple of goals away in Europe, albeit in a defeat, I think against a lesser defence, we will be able to grab a couple of goals. But I also think we'll be shaky at the same time at the back with the injuries and suspensions are plenty at United at the moment. So I'm going Bournemouth 2, Manchester United 2. Get your comments in with your score predictions below on the video. I'll leave a link in the comments section for you to get involved in our Premier League Predictor League. You get 1 point if you get the correct result. If you get the correct scoreline to match that as well, then that's 3 points for you. So get involved. It's a good bit of fun to keep us going. Stop us going completely insane with the football that we've been watching. I'll get Joe and Nick to comment their scores in there as well. Let us know also on the comments section how you line up. What would be the United side that you'd like to see? What formation are we setting up? How are we stopping Bournemouth's attacking threat? They do score goals, and we've been leaky. So how do we stop that from happening when we're going forward? Let us know. And let us know about anything else that we've covered on this week's show as well. If you agree with anything that I've said, but have a slightly different perspective on why you see it that way, let us know. If you disagree with what I'm saying, certainly let me know. I'm always open for a good debate. We're at We Follow United on Twitter. If you want to get involved in any of the topics or any of the discussions and debates that we have going on, just give us a follow. Give the video a like and subscribe as well to this channel for regular podcasts. Hoping to be back in the studio next week, joined by producer Joe and Nick as always. But in the meantime, with Bournemouth coming up, let's hope we can finally get something to end this horrible week. See you next week.